I want to point out what we're bringing to you today is really what we have asked for from Grantmakers for Education in past years, and that is the teacher voice and the teacher perspective. I think what we all know is that there's no greater impact to student success than having that effective teacher in the classroom. And we're very blessed today to have three very dynamic teachers joining us who have also uniquely had international experiences that we believe have helped them to be those leading dynamic teachers in the classroom for their students. And we get a chance to hear from them today and learn from their experiences. I'm going to start with Maya, and Maya asked if you would share a little bit, but also talk about how important it is for teachers to be able to have international experiences and global learning opportunities, and how does that make them and yourselves better teachers that you can bring back to your classrooms?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to speak, and thank you for that introduction. As a STEM educator in the District of Columbia, one of my biggest challenges with middle schoolers was really trying to bring the content alive. When students can walk away understanding how the chemistry they're learning in a classroom really resonates with what they do on an everyday basis, that's a win. It's a win for me because that means it's going to live with them and carry on further. In my classroom in particular, I understood that students in the District of Columbia have had access to numerous different advantages, and we're certainly a very international community, but my students weren't engaging with that community in a very intentional way. And so for middle schoolers, understanding how the significance of what they did and maybe the impact they could have on a global level was very important. So early on in my career as an educator, I made it a priority to globalize my classroom. So we would learn not only the district perspective and the local perspective, but also the international perspective and incorporate that in our learning. And so I engaged in numerous opportunities. If you were to look at my continuum of learning, or a life-space narrative for teaching, you would see that I traveled to Canada and did research at the Arctic Edge because I wanted to really bring back best practices and how scientists are researching climate change and incorporated that into my classroom. I led a group of teachers to Costa Rica so we could engage and have a real discourse around sustainability and biodiversity. And so many pockets of experiences on an international level really helped me engage my students and engage my community, both my school and the district, in these types of practices. For me, the capstone was the Fulbright Distinguished Teaching Award, in which I spent 6 months in South Africa, in Durban, engaging in real deep learning around how we could leverage community partners to resource under-resourced STEM classrooms. And so for teachers, it begins with awareness and flows to interest and then to engagement. And certainly that was my pathway for my own global learning.
Great. Thank you, Maya. So Noah, one of the things in education that we hear a lot about is how do we need to better prepare our students for the 21st century and this global economy and this global competition. And so I'm curious, based on your international experiences and your studies abroad, how do you feel that we're preparing students to be that good global citizens that we need to support our economy?
Great, and thank you very much to the organizers and sponsors of this conference for having us here. We really are thrilled to speak with you today. I used to, earlier in my career, think of myself as a global educator, and I had a turning point about 2 or 3 years ago when I participated in a fellowship called the Teachers for Global Classrooms program. And that's, if you're unfamiliar with that fellowship, it is sponsored by the Department of State, it's administered by IREX, and it's now in its 3rd or 4th year where 60 or 70 teachers come together. They take an online graduate level class in best practices in global education. There are bookend symposiums, and then there's a 2-week travel experience where you visit schools in another country. In one of 5 or 6 different countries they send us out, and I spent a couple weeks in Brazil. And through that fellowship, what I started to really understand is that what I was doing, which was great, I was taking students abroad to different countries on trips. I was telling stories and embedding global perspective into my lessons, but what I didn't understand earlier was what global education really is. They're teaching the students skills and competencies that they need to be able to interact with people from around the world and take action on global issues. These 21st century skills and competencies that we talk about often, the critical thinking, creative problem solving, collaboration, communication. These are the new basic skills that our students need to be successful in any career in their future. And so when I came back, we were all charged, the fellows of the Teachers for Global Classroom, we're all charged with coming back to our states and advocating for global education and finding ways to embed these types of skills and competencies into our instruction so students really are prepared for global citizenship. Another experience that woke me up a couple years ago is we had Professor Pasi Sahlberg, who I know is speaking later today, out to Seattle a couple of years ago for a conference. What can Washington State learn from the Finnish system? And I was in a breakout session, and there were some Finnish moms in the room who were living in Seattle at the time, and their children were in Seattle area schools. And the mother told a story of her son coming home from school complaining about, why does the teacher have to go through these checklists and tell us to do this step and this step and this step and this step? Why can't they just give us the problem and let us figure it out? Wow, and that comment blew me away, and I realized this is what we are doing. We are not teaching our students the skills they need to solve problems early on. By the time they get to me in high school, we still are holding their hands too much. And so to me, that is global education, those skills and competencies that we need to bring into our classroom. And it starts with teachers. It's really difficult to say to a teacher, okay, please start teaching globally now. Teachers have to have experiences, international experiences, rich professional learning experiences to be able to bring that knowledge back into their practice.
Fabulous. Thank you, Noah. And Melissa, Noah made reference to, I think, the challenge of how do you bring the learnings as you've gone abroad and studied and seen other things, and how do you bring those best practices and learnings back to the classroom? So as you share your experiences with the group today, maybe touch on how you bring those best practices back, and maybe specifically, what are you bringing, and how is your classroom different now given your international experiences?
Thank you as well for having me here this afternoon. I want to say that teacher leadership and traveling opportunities are an important way to honor those great practitioners while keeping them in the classroom. And that layer of support is very important. And we have to show others that we respect teachers. And until the system change, as teachers, we have to rely on partners that have that philanthropist spirit, such as NEA Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates, Hemsley Foundation, American Achieve, Teach Plus. All of these are great organizations that allow teachers to stay in the classroom. They support teachers. But when I was in Brazil, my life changed as a teacher. And it was what I needed. I already thought that I was a great practitioner. But I learned that I have to take risks as a teacher. And when I was there, I had to face my fears in two different ways. I don't like water. I don't like heights. I know I'm tall, but I don't like heights. So the NEA Foundation, those other global fellows, pushed me and encouraged me to do that. And I was glad that I did that because I was able to see the world so much differently. And when I came back, I know we hate saying a sense of urgency, but it is a sense of urgency because we have to prepare our students. I started calling my students junior scientists and empowering them. And they wear science lab jackets as they do over 60 or 70 lessons. And that's difficult for a teacher because normally we focus on reading and math. And it's important that we expose our students to various things, especially STEM education. And so I hosted a STEM career speed dating. And my students had a courtship. And they talked to pharmacies and physicians. And of course, when I was over there in Brazil, I saw Partners of Education give millions of dollars to put technology in those classrooms. I don't have that in my urban schools. So that's a downfall for me as an educator, because inquiry-based learning is important. You have to be able to get students to collaborate in teams, working on hands-on experience, because that's going to allow them to be able to compete globally. And so my life has changed because of that global experience, and I'm so grateful for the NEA Foundation for doing that for teachers.
That's great. Thank you. Did you bring back the love of soccer or football from Brazil as well and share that with your students?
I did.
All right, you have to. Can't go to Brazil and not bring back soccer, right? Okay, fabulous. Well, you made a comment, and we got a bit of applause when you said it. You talked about how we need to respect teachers. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the profession of teaching. Let's talk about teacher leadership. Let's talk about what the role of teachers really is in driving and changing and innovating education. And so, Noah, let me start with you and ask if you might help us to better understand, is it different internationally, the role of teachers, the respect of teachers, than what you see or feel in the United States?
Sure. And I do believe that the majority of teachers in the United States can lead if given the time and space to do so. And part of the focus should be on actually supporting school leaders, principals, in how do you cultivate teacher leadership skills in your school and then leverage them. Yeah. I've had the opportunity to participate with colleagues from my school district in the Global Cities Education Network, which is an initiative of the Asia Society. And I know there's some folks from the Asia Society here today. This is a group of 10 cities, 5 in North America, 5 in Asia and Australia. And the delegations come together once a year for an annual meeting and are working throughout the year in working groups as well. And we've learned a lot from colleagues in other nations about how time is structured very differently to allow for teachers to develop and use leadership skills. In the United States, we know from the recent TALIS survey, which is the Teaching and Learning International Survey, that about half of teachers in this country never observe a colleague teach. It almost never happens for at least half of teachers in the United States, whereas when you do look to other nations, when you look to other systems like Singapore, Shanghai, Hong Kong, the percentage of teachers will go way up for how many see their colleagues. We also know from the MetLife surveys that in the United States, 90% or more of teachers will say that we learn our best tricks, our best strategies from our colleagues. Mm-hmm. So there's obviously a disconnect there. When you dig in and look at how time is structured in other systems versus our own, you start to see some striking differences. So, for example, again, coming from the recent TALIS survey, which is through the OECD, you see that teachers in the United States will spend approximately 27 hours a week instructing students up in front of students. And we often say, we need teachers to be teaching students more time in the day. However, when you break it down to the individual teacher, the more time in a day you're teaching formally, the less time you have for professional learning, collaboration with colleagues, learning from colleagues, watching other colleagues teach, analyzing that instruction and improving your own practice. So when you look at the average time that teachers are teaching in other nations, Singapore is around 17 hours a week. So that's 10 hours less. The TALIS average, that's 34 countries, about 100,000 teachers were surveyed, is about 19 hours a week. So other systems have found ways to create structured time for professional learning, for teachers to watch each other teach and take those lessons back and transform their practice, which will, of course, lead to greater student learning. So I think that's, for me, one of the biggest lessons. And I've had some unique opportunities the last 3 or 4 years to have part of my time released through working with an organization called the Center for Teaching Quality. I've had an opportunity to serve in a hybrid role where, coming back from my fellowship in Brazil, I was able to create a role in my school and my district where I could use what I had learned to advance global education in my school district. And I had some time released during the day. One year it was 50%, one year it was 40%. This year it's down to 20%, but that time is critical. Otherwise, the time and space to lead simply is not there.
Fabulous. Maya, maybe touch on this as well. What were your observations internationally in other communities and countries around how teachers are viewed and the culture and respect of teachers?
Well, the country I specifically traveled in for my Fulbright, South Africa was kind of in the same space as we were around teacher effectiveness. Well, I would say they're beginning to think about what teacher evaluation and teacher effectiveness meant. And so they really picked my brain because being from DC, we have an impact evaluation system, a value-added model for teacher evaluation. So we were really able to have a discourse around what effective teaching looks like and the space to teach, what that space looks like. For me as an educator around teacher leadership, what I notice as I travel and interact with other communities is that leadership in other countries is much more consistent with a teacher's experience in the classroom. Whereas in the U.S., you could meet a teacher who's been teaching for a year and they could be deemed and empowered to be a teacher leader. And so kind of understanding that dichotomy and that dynamic was interesting because when I was abroad, I was within my first 6 years of teaching in the classroom. So considerably, I was a very young teacher in many practitioners' eyes, yet to even be called a practitioner in some countries. And so in my learning, the scope of what it means to be a teacher leader was variable. Certainly we have best practices, as you shared, from other countries, but we certainly have countries that are not quite there. And so when we visit those countries, and the discourse can be just as rich as looking at countries that are kind of leading the charge around time to teach in a classroom and things of that nature. I think we have also a lot to learn from countries that are in the middle ground or countries that are not quite there. But the important thing is that we're having dialogue and discourse around these issues.
Melissa, any thoughts?
When I was in Brazil, I could tell that the teachers felt respected. I didn't hear them complaining at all. You know how teachers, you say, stay away from the danger zone, the teacher lounge. And whenever you can kind of sneak in and say, girl, it's not what you think. They really was excited about being in school, being there and with their students. They felt empowered, and you could tell that they collaborated a lot. And the partners of education invested in that and allowed those teachers to go abroad and study and see what it's like. And I think when you're able to see the world differently, you do things differently. And so I hope that we can feel that way in the United States, that teachers can get the respect that they deserve. We're on the front line. We're the one that's impacting student achievement every day. And until then, it'll be a challenge for us.
So we're touching on support. Oh, please, Maya.
I did want to add, I think you mentioned this before about the infrastructure for teacher leadership to support, or for school leaders to support this type of learning, to be able to go abroad, to be able to kind of engage or have that space to teach is really important and often a barrier in most communities. A lot of times we talk about access points and systems, and it's really difficult to get a principal to let a teacher out of a classroom, and that can serve as a barrier. Not really understanding the investment that they're making in that teacher and their experience returns tenfold. And also serves to retain their strongest teachers. And so we need a lot of help in the field convincing our leadership that this is an investment worth making.
And just to add to the Brazil story, I had a slightly different experience in Brazil when I went a couple years ago. I did meet a lot of teachers who were really struggling just with basic resources in their schools. And I visited a network of language schools, and I just wanted to... So Brazil is an enormous, complex country, as large in size as the United States, just about. But I want to echo something that was said, which is they are investing in sending their teachers abroad, particularly English teachers and science teachers. Thousands and thousands of Brazilian teachers are going abroad to learn what best practices are out there and bringing them back to their states and their cities. The U.S. Embassy is supporting this effort, but really the government there has seen the value in doing so. So we do not see the same type of focus in the United States where going abroad as a teacher is a
value add.
It is, and there are many great opportunities to do so, but you might agree when you start going on these fellowships, you start to see the same people.
Yep.
And you start to see people, great teachers who are riding these opportunities because they are fantastic, but we need to find ways to get more educators outside of their comfort zone, out into other parts of the world to gain experience to bring it back to their classrooms.
And I will add another point to that. It's this level of engagement is key. Almost like learning a language won't happen if you don't go immerse yourself in the culture. Having the mind shift, speaking to a teacher via Skype in another country is one experience and certainly a valuable experience. But traveling and understanding what they do on a day-to-day basis really shifts your perspective as an educator in a way that you can't even imagine. I'm still thinking about ways that my Fulbright impacted my own learning experience to this day. And so the investment is rich, but the immersion experience or even a 2-week or a 1-week experience really goes a long way to shifting the culture of a classroom and shifting the culture of a school.
So let's dig a little deeper on supportive teachers, and especially from a community perspective, and by definition, we in this group are grant makers for education, so no fair plugging anything for money at this point, but you have the mic, you can do what you want. So how can we as philanthropy, from your perspective, better support teachers in this space? Any thoughts, Melissa?
Oh, if I had a wish list. I wish that philanthropies would create innovative schools right here in the United States. What I saw the Partners of Education do, and I guess that was different from the schools that you had seen, it was private sectors that went into those schools. And they understood that education was the key of social change. And we struggle with that here in the United States as well. And that's what I appreciated and valued, that they took the initiative. It was 70 partners at that time, and then they wanted 110 by 214. And I'm sure they're working on more. I think if we say we want innovators, we want like Wendy, who started Teach for America and different things to be innovative, we have to invest. It's almost like put your money where your mouth is with this statement. And you have to be able to support students. I work in an urban district. Those students are very passionate. They want to be dreamers and doers, but they need the exposure just like everyone else. And I can think about a student, Harshita. And Harshita, I said, Harshita, you can be a scientist. And she's like, okay. I said, what kind of scientist? So what do you want to be? And she said, I want to be a doctor that takes the babies out the mommy's tummies. And I'm thinking, wow, it's 7. And so as educators and as philanthropists, people who are giving those funds, they need to make Harshita's dream come true and other students.
Noah?
Sure. I've had the opportunity to work on a couple of exciting global education projects in the last couple of years, and I would say none of the work has been possible without strong partnerships, community partnerships, partnerships between our school and local organizations. But a lot of the ideas for these projects have come from teachers and students. And so I would say that I would hope we could look for those innovative projects that are working directly with teacher leaders and students, so where the ideas are coming from the classroom. The ideas are coming from the innovative educators and students rather than a more common scenario where teachers are implementing plans that are created up here. So there are many, many innovative and exciting ideas for transforming our schools, and many of those are held by teachers and students. So finding those organizations that are working directly with those change makers at the classroom level.
Great. STEM has become a very important. Did you want to add to
No,
it?
go ahead.
But I want to transition into the focus on STEM. Yeah, this is, I'm going to refer to Maya here real quick. But, for many of us, STEM has clearly become a point of emphasis in education over the last number of years, critically important to the competitiveness. And we talk about how do we prepare our students for this 21st century global economy. And so the question that I think I have, and Maya, you as the STEM specialist, is it different internationally, their focus on STEM, or how do they transition or focus their students in the STEM fields? And what can we learn from your experiences abroad here in the United States?
It's interesting. When I travel abroad, the emphasis on science is key. It's crucial. It's an imperative on an international level, science, technology, engineering, and math. When I asked students, the students that I was working with in South Africa, what they wanted to be, most of them would say, I want to be a chemical engineer, or I want to go into engineering or business. But then my own students would say, well, I want to be a lawyer or an athlete and that's great too, But the answers were different, and for me that really was a message that I received, that the access point or the understanding of how someone could kind of enter the workforce, excuse me, was very different. And so what I noticed were a couple of things in my travels. One, I noticed there was a huge emphasis on physical science over biological sciences. One, because water is expensive in a lot of developing countries, and so there's an imperative to really focus on the physical sciences. Two, I learned that there was an emphasis on engineering, a much more kind of acceptance that engineering is a pathway to solve problems. It's really a creative industry in which you can leverage your innovative thoughts and apply your scientific knowledge in a real intentional way to create change in your community. And so the spin that was put on these topics was very different than I think something we're trying to move towards in the U.S., but we're not quite there at the classroom level. Certainly a movement is afoot, right? But we want to see our students kind of considering engineering and STEM careers in that way. And so I noticed quite a few things, but those were my major takeaways. Yeah.
Okay. Melissa?
STEM education was very important to the Partners of Education. I remember going to one high school, and they were adopted by a sister group of Microsoft. I can't remember the name. But they allowed the kids to have all kind of technology in their hands. Technology was everywhere. And those teachers channeled those things to help them understand English and understand our culture. And what resonated with me when this teacher, Sonia, said, I feel that if I teach them English, they can go anywhere. And I was thinking, wow, that is powerful. And it made me think, are we really preparing our students to go anywhere, to go global, and to have a globalized system? And that was very impactful to me. But STEM education is very important to them. STEM gives kids the right mindset, as I mentioned earlier, problem solving, reasoning skills that they need. And it helps impact all content areas.
Right. Maya mentioned all the kids wanted to be chemical engineers. I wanted to be one too, till I figured out you had to do good in chemistry. Figured I better find another major. So let's talk more about technology, though. Technology in the classroom. You talked about how it's everywhere in the classrooms you experienced. So what was your learning abroad around how technology integrated into education, and how is it different here? What do we need to do better in our classrooms here?
I think my travel experience, I intentionally tried to liaise with countries that were either kind of just grappling with or kind of prior to embarking on this. So not necessarily like the leaders in education in these areas. Technology is a huge barrier in South Africa. Similar. It was interesting because when I arrived there the teachers, we started talking about smart boards and iPads and all of these things, and access to this is very limited. And the teachers would share, we bolt down the computers, but they still get stolen. And so even though the companies will donate funds, access to technology and the intention is often, we don't see a return on our investment because the technology leaves. And then I got back to DC, and the entire laptop cart at my school was stolen. And I thought, interesting. So this idea that we want to put technology in students' hands, we want them to value it, we want it to be an access point, it is a 21st century skill. It's going to be a necessity. It is important. I think what we see as a trend is how can we go mobile with tech? How can we use what students have in their hands to really empower them? And that's something I see consistent on a global level. How do we use our iPhones? How do we use our smartphones in that way? And that's a much better access point for a lot of developing countries. I say developing. If you can get your hands on a smartphone, which is difficult to pay for, then that's a much better access point for a student than a technology that's sitting in a classroom. So it's there, but it's emerging.
Noah?
Yeah, just real briefly, technology can be a wonderful tool when used effectively. And I'll say that the most exciting uses of technology that I've seen internationally and in the United States have been when the technology empowers students to really become leaders and independent thinkers and learners in their classrooms. So using technology to collaborate on a team to solve a problem, to me, is the most exciting use, as opposed to simply replacing a textbook or being able to do internet research, but actually using that technology to get to the global competencies and 21st century skills that we want our students to develop.
So to that end, high schoolers are now, I want to develop an app. They want to develop an app for everything, and transitioning and taking that kind of what Noah was talking about and having them think locally about how they can create impact and change in our communities with their desire to engage in technology. That's inherent. That's also something. We want to start with where kids are at and then capitalize on that and leverage that.
Let me ask one final question, and this is one we really hadn't talked about beforehand, so I'm kind of throwing you guys a curve. I'll give you a second to think about it. But back to the audience we have here, grant makers for education, obviously individuals and leaders in their own right who care about education and have a desire to positively impact education. What is the most important thing that we should know and understand about what teachers really want?
Respect. R-E-S-P-C-T.
Is it respect?
I'll chime in on that.
I really think my colleagues on the panel, they hit the nail on the head, so I didn't reiterate that time to teach, time to really be a practitioner and not a technician, that is huge right now. And you mentioned the 27 hours. Being able to teach and really invest in your professional learning is I want to say a luxury. Having an hour, having 5 minutes to go to the bathroom from some teachers is a luxury right now. But having time to really internalize and be able to be thoughtful about what you're doing in a classroom, to collaborate in meaningful ways, to explore leadership opportunities or professional development, access to that is key, right? And so respecting the profession, respecting that it's not in a year you're going to build a great teacher. It's in a few years, and it's a long-term investment. If we want to see teachers stay in the classroom, we need to feel like this field is sustainable. Yeah. And right now, the profession is not sustainable. We're seeing teachers leave, not because they don't love working with students. Most teachers leave because the system is not sustainable, or the job is not sustainable for them. And so we need to find better ways to respect the profession and allow that space for learning.
Great. Noah?
Yeah, respect and trust are all very important. Supporting one teacher like me may not change the system, but helping system leaders understand why and how we can change the structures in our system and create more of those opportunities for teachers to lead without leaving the classroom, because we all know that the typical career trajectory in the United States is you teach, and then if you want to move up to the next level, you leave. and we need to change that.
Absolutely. Melissa, final thoughts?
Right, and I know we're getting to a closure, and I want to say thank you for funding education. But in chiming in, I'm a background singer to respect. We want to be compensated. I know a lot of teachers try to stay away and say, hey, we didn't get in this profession to make money. Wrong. That's why I started getting advanced degrees, joining organization, and doing other things. It's about the money. I want it to rain, okay? And so I just hope that we get respected. In order to get respected, we have to be well compensated.
So we're going to wrap up as the conversation started to get real, right? Which is good, which means there's more to come, more discussions. I would encourage, let's give the panel, our great teachers, one last round of applause. Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for being with us. I encourage any of you, if you have other questions for them, they will be around during the networking and breakout sessions. Please seek them out. They have so much more to share with each and every one of us. And now I would encourage you to learn more about global education and what's happening internationally. Our breakout sessions with the lists of where those are located. Please, we encourage you to go to the next breakout sessions and keep this conversation going and enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the conference. So thank you for being here. Thank you once again to our teachers.
El sol, tu bronceado y el calor no puede estar mejor. Zumba.